Welcome to The Voice of Retail. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada and with the support of Astound Commerce. Modern commerce is complex and leaders need to look beyond web and marketing tech to understand the complete customer experience. The Astound Commerce Maturity Assessment lets you self-evaluate the state of your business against modern commerce demands. Visit astoundcommerce.com/maturity. On this episode, we're off to LA to meet Jeanne Anderson, Senior Vice President and General Manager at Saatchi Art. With decades of global e-commerce experience, including back in the beginning of the dot-com boom in the late 90s with eToys, Jeanne and I talk shop, what makes a luxury online site thrive, and all about this global marketplace for art that democratizes the art buying experience and puts money back into the hands of the artist. Next, I'm in Portland, catching up with a longtime friend and colleague, Kate Delhagen, strategic advisor and consultant, board director, and founder of Oregon Sports Angels. In the late 90s, as a pioneering Forrester analyst to over a decade as a senior executive at Nike, we talk about the current state of e-commerce and the tradecraft of investing in the right people, business ideas, and companies all at the right time. First, let's check in with Jeanne from Saatchi Art. Jeanne, welcome to The Voice of Retail. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So interesting to speak with you. I was in Toronto. I'm here in Toronto, and I was experiencing a Van Gogh exhibit. This virtual exhibit yesterday. So art was on my mind, and lo and behold, we get to chat about art and online art, two of my passions. Why don't we jump right in? Tell us about yourself, personal, professional journey. Clearly, I see, checking out the background on LinkedIn, deep expertise in e-commerce, some high velocity stuff, FTD, all the way back to eToys, which I remember quite fondly. Such a great startup in the go-go days. But so you're a real veteran, and tell us about that. A bit of your journey, and then your role at Saatchi Art.
I was a part of that very first generation of e-commerce builders at eToys. It was such an amazing place to start my career, filled with extremely strong, smart people. We just had a remarkable ride there. If I really think about those eToys days, those lessons that we learned, I've carried through my career, particularly around innovation, how to quickly move and how to create. Back then we were inventing things like, if you can believe it, online checkout, right? Like back in 1998.
I remember. I mean, off mic we were talking about that. We knew someone, Michael Burrs from Hudson's Bay. I remember, you were paying like $1 million to big firms just to take a credit card online. Like people forget how pioneering those days was in terms of online, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, back then you weren't only converting customers, you were literally introducing customers to the concept of buying things online.
That's right.
It was a whole other level of conversion optimization. And I take those lessons with me. I mean, I have my whole career. So yes, I'm always proud of the eToys experience. I mean, in the future, since then, I've worked at ZipRecruiter, Dog Vacay, and yes, in the florist world at Teleflora and FTD. I've done e-commerce and marketplace businesses all that time. From a career perspective, I came up mostly in product management, but I've also held roles in marketing, which I think has given me a more holistic view of what it takes to really drive a business. And ultimately, that's what I use to approach my role at Saatchi Art. At Saatchi, I oversee e-commerce, hospitality, and the international art fair business. And I'm always looking across all channels to see how we can serve and delight customers and bring them that magic that you were talking about, which is the passion and fun of buying art. What drew me to the role at Saatchi is really sort of two things. The art world has always been behind the times when it comes to going digital and selling online. And I saw it as this really unique opportunity to transform an industry. As a person who was a product manager for most of my career, I really love solving problems and transforming experiences is really meaningful work to me. And Saatchi Art's doing that. So it's very satisfying. Second, I really find myself drawn to marketplace models where the supply side of the business is made up of small business owners or micro business owners. That's been a real theme for me, I think. Whether it was working to help people find jobs like I did at ZipRecruiter, or helping florists get flower orders when I did that at Teleflora and FTD. I really like that satisfaction of knowing that you're putting dollars into the pockets of real people where it actually matters and is meaningful to them. And our artists at Saatchi Art are particularly deserving in that way. The work of being an artist is not easy work, and making a living at being an artist is just terribly difficult. And I know this is going to sound funny, but one of my favorite things to do at Saatchi Art is actually to pay artists. It sort of sounds like accounting work.
Sure.
And maybe not.
No, I can see it. It's very satisfying, right? I mean, it is really, it is really the embodiment of what marketplaces are meant to do, right? Use your skill and expertise and gather together an audience to see folks that it's just hard to get seen, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That's the tough part.
That's exactly it. I mean, a few weeks ago, we paid out an artist that was in this really remote part of India, and it was for a piece of art over $1,000 US. And at that moment, I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, this money is going to go such a long way there. This artist is going to be so happy. And, before Saatchi Art, how would this small town Indian artist sell to an art collector in Palm Springs? It's like remarkable to think about. And now this artist is going to be able to, fund themselves. They're going to buy paint. They're going to buy supplies, and they're going to live as a professional artist in this remote town. Like you said, it's the magic of a marketplace model, and that's sort of a big part of what I love about Saatchi.
Let me follow that thread for a bit. How do you find artists? How do artists find you? And I guess there's some kind of validation process, or to make sure that they've got the right bona fides and all those things. Just to speak to that for a bit, like
Sure.
the model. How do you find and validate artists and the art and you don't hold inventory, I suspect.
We do not.
So,
it is.
So you never get to see it. So and a big value component to me as a shopper is that you've got that name on it, so I can trust that it is what it is and it's the quality. Walk me through the process a bit.
Sure. I mean, really the special element that you're referring to is our curatorial team. Artists all over the world can upload their art, but we really do spend quite a bit of time and effort making sure that our curators have a good look at everything that's coming in. And, these are folks with art history backgrounds who've sold in galleries. Our chief curation officer, Rebecca Wilson, comes from an incredible background of working in the art world. And they're the magic. So they're the ones going through the artwork. And while we want to welcome every artist, and while we really truly believe there's a buyer for every artist, when it comes to highlighting a particular, set of artworks or, telling the story of a particular artist, that's where our curators come in. They create merchandised collections, if you will. They promote ideas around new trends, and they share that with people who visit the site so that you get both that wonderful balance of the marketplace effect where everyone who is an artist can offer something, but also to get a curatorial viewpoint and to understand that an expert has picked out some special ones for you to look at. That's really it.
That's one thing I like particularly about the site as I looked at it is you and I might call it in a different world, the merchandising of the site. In other words, that there's clearly a lot of art on the site, but how do you find and distill and navigate through and explore? Because I it's not like I want to search for, though I did actually, David Bowie art and just try, and there's some really cool things actually. And there was a great Jim Morrison one. But it's kind of a mix of search and navigation, right? And I think that's what struck me again about what I loved about the site after I spent time with it is it was well merchandised, as you say. We'd call it, you're calling it curated because that's what it is. But I think of it as well merchandised. It's not an unfamiliar problem, right? Lots and lots of products.
Right.
How do you make sure and put them forward to people in such a way that it makes sense in some way, that there's a point of view, right? And the
Absolutely.
Point of view in my mind does come across on the site. So congratulations about that.
Thank you.
Yeah. luxury retail in general, and I think you play in that space, one of those last vestiges of e-commerce for a whole bunch of reasons. And there's some school of thought, you can go back 20 years ago that luxury wasn't going to thrive online. It wasn't going to be successful. That particularly in the art world, I would think, being in the traditional being in the physical world of the galleries and experiencing the art is part of an experience. What tools do you put in place to transcend and take both luxury and art online effectively that kind of help carry through that experience of the gallery walk into the virtual world?
You mean more of like the physical experience of buying luxury?
Well, the physical, some of the physical experience of buying is, the associate serving you in the physical world. And you don't have a lot of that online. It's really, I guess it's picking up on our merchandising idea. But, one of the things I saw, for example, that I loved is you can click on a button and you can see the scale of the picture against some furniture, right? So talk about that a little bit. Like when you think about your one level of your competition is galleries, so to speak, you transcend that on the site. Just talk about how you think about that, from your product management perspective, or just the kind of ethos you take to what that site needs to do.
So it is unusual in that our true competitor out there is a traditional gallery experience. Well, the truth of buying at an art gallery is actually not a particularly pleasant experience. I think it's funny because a lot of people a lot of retailers associate luxury with that higher experience of walking in, as you said, to the store and just having a special experience. But in an art gallery, the buying experience has not actually been comfortable for most buyers. For most people, going into a gallery or a high-end art fair is actually very, very intimidating. I mean, even if you can even get in, some galleries are appointment only, which tells you something right there, right? They're not actually looking to market to all buyers. And when you buy art in a gallery, the prices aren't transparent. The curatorial assistant or the gallery person who greets you there may not even treat you very well. And the average art buyer doesn't know how to speak to art with any confidence, right? It's very uncomfortable. So what our ethos is and what drives us around the website is to make that online experience just so much better. And it is. When you compare the two experiences, our curators, they make you feel welcome. They want you to find the artwork that speaks to you, that you'll love, that you'll have in your home. There's no judgment. There's only a desire to really just help you find a piece that makes you happy. And the online tools, as you said, we strive to make sure that even if you don't know exactly how to speak to the art that you're looking for, which most people don't, we have tons of deep filters to help you find it. We even have a visual search. So when you go to the site and you see something that's sort of similar to what you're looking for, but not exactly it, you can do a similar visual search and find other things sort of like it, which I think is super helpful. It is neat. And, one of the other things that we strive to do is make people feel like this experience really, truly is possible, and that the artwork, when it arrives, really, truly will look good in their homes, which is why we released that feature that you were talking about, the ability to take the artwork and show it to you in your actual room through augmented reality. So if you use your mobile device, you can select a piece of artwork, and through AR, you can place it up on your wall and look through that view and see, yes, in fact, this is going to look great in my dining room. Those are the things that we do to overcome and make overcome any hesitation a buyer may have, and to make that online experience really sing and connect for people.
Well, it's this intersection, as I reflect on what you're saying, of the democratization of luxury fine art, great art, and the reduction of friction. Right?
Most definitely.
What we're talking about is the friction and buying process. Whether that's you don't feel confident in understanding art, and you sometimes you walk in a gallery, you say, "Listen, I really want a blue painting because that's going to go with my house," and people are like, "Don't pick your art by color," but it's up to us how we choose our art.
Absolutely. If you want a blue painting, we're going to help you find the most beautiful, incredible blue painting.
Yeah, right on. So, okay, let's talk about friction, because thanks to COVID, the COVID era, we don't know how long this is all going to last. I was speaking with a bricks and mortar retailer, and I said, "Oh my God, it's all friction now. It's nothing but friction. Like we work so hard to reduce friction. Now it's everything about it is friction." So you've talked about some of this thinking and strategies and behind the site kind of pre-COVID. What has been your experience in let's call it the first phase of the COVID era, and has it changed anything, and are any ways that you're thinking about the product or the features or your relationship with the artists or how you're getting products to consumers? Anything has presented itself, surprised you, or you said, well, we've got to do something differently based on what we now know and what we think is going to be the case for the next period of time?
Well, I think I've heard you in other episodes talk about this great acceleration, and it really resonated with me when I heard you talk about it. For us, that's exactly what COVID did. When we first experienced COVID, I mean, like anyone, it was this huge shockwave that hit the business, right? We had planned for a really big year in 2020. In 2019, we'd had a phenomenal year of growth. across all of our business units. And so as we looked at 2020, we were really planning for yet another big growth year. And when COVID hit, that shockwave, when it first hit, we got down to just thinking, how are we going to survive this? Right?
Yeah, right on.
For me personally, I was worried about the health of my employees, the health of our artists. That was sort of the immediate thought. And then you turn to worrying about, having to drastically cut costs and preserve salaries and preserve jobs. And then we worried about our art fair business, which, as you would imagine, was hit quite hard because we had to postpone and in some cases cancel our spring art fairs. It was a lot. It really was. We moved the team remote. We just had to survive the storm. When COVID initially first passed, though, those first couple of weeks, that fear moment, when that passed, it sort of transformed for us. And by mid-April, things really changed quite a bit. I think people were at home, or at least high household income people were at home. They were quarantined. They were staring at their blank, uninspired walls. And they thought, I've been meaning to buy art. I'm not taking a vacation this year, clearly. I'm not spending money on clothing. Let me see if we can buy art online. And that's where I really think about that great acceleration phase, because suddenly we were taking off and people were buying art in numbers that we just could not have predicted. And we had to pivot. We went from just trying to save jobs to managing record growth, right? Better than we had ever imagined for the year. That's where I was really grateful. We were an omnichannel retailer that had been rooted in e-commerce first, because we already had this really agile startup mentality and our team was just so great. Within 4 weeks, our engineering team built out an entire e-commerce site for the art fair business. We moved all of the fair artists to what we came to call the online studios, and they started quickly selling very well. In fact, actually, they just passed $1 million in sales in July, which is just incredible for something that didn't exist in March. It was really, it was just so rewarding to see. But what you were talking about, how did that change our roadmap, or how do we look at the world post-COVID? Again, because we were always technology first, I really felt great about the fact that, we're well positioned for this moment.
Yeah.
We've launched things like View in a Room in AR, and we have the ability for our art advisors to work with you over the phone or, via Zoom if that's what it requires, because, that's something that we've always been open to do. And our roadmap was well suited for the moment that we hit. So I just feel very grateful and lucky that as a tech first company, we were able to rise to the moment.
Yeah, it's a common narrative I hear talking to retailers that the first couple of weeks were quite frightening, right? Who knows what's going to happen to the economy? Who knew, literally it's a liquidity issue. Are we going to have enough liquidity? But the retailers who are digital natives had the biggest advantage because they, just the DNA of the organization, first of all, was just, and culture was just about fast moving and change. But I've been impressed for, bigger organizations, traditionally slower, who have made quick decisions. But tell me about, you mentioned the art fair, the other art fair. I think I've seen it as the other art fair. A couple of questions. First of all, give me a sense of who your customers are. And then tell me about this other art fair. I see there's a Toronto version of it, so that caught my attention. Tell me about both of those. Yeah.
So, well, let's sort of tackle that in two questions there. So, who our customers are, right? We have a couple of different customer personas that we appeal to. As you would imagine, one of them is that classic luxury buyer. So, a person who's used to owning luxury goods, travels quite a bit, has a 5-star lifestyle, high household income. They're professionals, doctors, lawyers, very educated, very discerning. Their average order is over $2,000. These are really power shoppers in many ways.
It's interesting. What's interesting to me about that segment is in the democratization of this platform. You would think the higher net worth individuals, for example, like to be catered to a little more. That a click and buy is. I'm buying art. I'd rather have someone handing me a cappuccino. But by the sounds of it, it has reached those levels. That's what I was kind of getting at when I was thinking about luxury moving online. Right? Whether you buy the same, if you buy the same widget, prestige cosmetics, for example, you buy it in a department store or a drugstore, it somehow seems to be a different experience in a department store or a finer store. And so it's interesting to hear you talk about, the high net worth individuals still moving online in the luxury web-based platform like yours. Interesting.
Yeah, I totally understand thinking about it that way, because it is the way we traditionally think about a luxury buyer. But look, their time is just as precious as anyone else's, and they know what they want. So coming online for them, I think, is a natural extension. And if they do want that highly tailored, catered to experience, we have our art advisory team ready to do that for them. There's more selection online. There's a more, I think, robust view of art for a discerning buyer. So I think for a lot of luxury buyers, I think they feel like they have more choice, frankly, than going into a gallery where it's a pre-selected group of paintings. Maybe there's only 10 to look at, right?
Is there a feature on the site, or is it something you're considering that people can reach out to your curators and have the curators kind of help them find the right piece based on what shoppers are looking for? Is that a feature you might be looking for?
Yes, it absolutely. It already exists on the site, actually. Our art advisors are available. So as you're browsing through the site, there are many prompts that ask if you'd like some help buying your work through our art advisory services. And it's really wonderful because you have the opportunity to sort of give them a brief, right? Like, this is the kind of artwork I'm looking for. These are the sorts of styles that I enjoy. I'm looking for painting. I'm looking for drawing. This is the size I need. Tell them a little bit about your decor style, if that's relevant. Tell them if you want to make an investment in the art and if it's something that you intend to sort of think about as an investment. And they put together a collection for you that's highly tailored. That is I think a feature that in particular our higher income, more collector minded customers do enjoy, but it's available to everyone and it's actually free. So it's something that I encourage buyers in all cases to use.
Last question for you. I was chatting with a retailer and they said that the concept of community is now more important in some ways than ever. And I have to think that being a successful retailer, particularly in the luxury and art space, that community is important. Advice to retailers who are listening, and is community important in what you do? And do you think going forward, you've got such great experience in e-commerce, that community will continue to matter and to make a difference in any kind of site, but particularly yours and other? Would you encourage other retailers, for example, that are listening to continue to build or try to build their own communities?
We think about sort of two communities at Saatchi Art, and I think this is maybe a marketplace trait, right? On one side, we have an artist community that's very robust and very communicative, and that's really important to us. Our artists are incredibly talented, and hearing their feedback and understanding their stories is a big part of what we do, and we benefit from it. On the other side, on the buyer side, it's sort of interesting. In other companies I've worked at, the buyer community is a really important part of the retail strategy. But as in all parts of retail, when you think about strategy and how to spend your time and resources, you really have to center on your customers and what's important to them. And at least in the art space, we found that ultimately buying art is a deeply personal experience. Two different art buyers usually have two very different points of view on what they want to buy. It might be interesting to know what other art buyers are buying, and maybe it will inspire you to finally go out and just do it for yourself. But it's not really what drives sales. What makes the consumer buy is a personal connection, like what they feel when they look at the artwork. It's emotional. So, yes, we share buyer stories. We encourage buyers to tell their stories, especially on social. But what we really focus in on is helping buyers discover the artwork that they love on their own. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally makes sense. When you thanks for unpacking for me. If folks want to learn a bit more about Saatchi Art yourself, where do they go?
Well, of course, visit SaatchiArt.com. And then also you can go to theotherartfair.com to see our online studios, which are live now, and learn about fairs that will be, hopefully, crossing fingers, back up and running soon. And for you, that means maybe a trip to the Toronto Art Fair, which I would love to see you at. Honestly, also, one of the best ways to learn about what we're doing and the artists that we're showcasing is to go on Instagram and give us a follow, either for Saatchi Art or the Other Art Fair. It's really, honestly, a great follow. It's just beautiful artwork and wonderful stories about artists, and it's a good one.
Really made for Instagram.
It really is.
If any site's made for Instagram, this one.
We've got it.
And I really appreciate it, and I'll make mention of it, that you've got you can see art in Canadian dollars and US dollars, so you have a currency, a great currency presentation, and that's just huge for us. So it's really well done, and congratulations. I wish you continued success. It's a great site, great art. I'd encourage everybody to go check it out. And really, thanks for being on the Voice of Retail podcast. Really enjoyed our conversation.
I enjoyed it as well. Thanks so much.
Hi, it's Jim Okamura, partner at Macmillan Dewell and co-founder of Global E-commerce Leaders Forum. We are very excited to announce the latest extension to the Global E-commerce Leaders Forum events, the Global E-commerce Tech Talks podcast. In partnership with Kent Allen, Scott Silverman, and our host Michael LeBlanc, we'll be debuting and discussing custom proprietary research designed specifically for global e-commerce retailers and talking to e-commerce industry leaders around the world to help us sharpen our saw blades when it comes to doing business across borders. Check out the 1-minute trailer episode available now. Apple and Spotify Plus, all major podcast platforms, with episodes debuting every 2 weeks.
Okay, welcome to the Voice of Retail. How are you doing?
Hey, Michael. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me. Looking forward to chatting.
Well, listen, it is such a treat to catch up with you, if not in person, over the phone. In fact, I was trying to think about two things. When is the last time you and I saw each other? We met in the late 90s. The last time you and I saw each other, I believe, was in New York City at the Shop Talk Founders Party that he has during the NRF Big Show. I think that's the last time you and I were together. We should pause and congratulate Anil for selling a conference pre-pandemic. My goodness, talk about timing.
Timing. I think yes. I think
God.
You're right. I think you're right. We were in a townhouse chit-chatting about both the good old days and the current times. Of course, a lot has changed, but you're right. Yes, congrats to him.
Yeah, it's good for him. And in fact, you and I were supposed to be together for this interview at Shop Talk in March. So it kind of all somehow seems to circulate around Shop Talk, but that's neither here nor there. But listen.
Well,
as I said,
it does. Let's talk shop.
Let's talk shop. Well, listen. Why don't we jump right in? Tell us a bit about yourself. Of course, I know you well since the late 90s, I'm sure. But about your professional journey, about Oregon Sports Angels, and the things that you're kind of up to today. Give us a sense of yourself.
I'll keep it brief. First, I'm from the East Coast. I grew up in Pennsylvania, and while I live in Oregon, I've come to discover that you can take a person out of the East Coast, but you can't take the East Coast out of the person. So I'll give you my version of my background in that spirit. I like to ask people if they are familiar with sandwiches, like a hoagie or a submarine sandwich, and depending on which coast you grew up, you'll answer the question differently. So let's just call it a hoagie. I graduated from college and I went to work for 10 years, or the first part of the Bun experience, at Rodale Press in Pennsylvania. Very progressive magazine publisher. Stumbled into a job as an editor, worked my way into a marketing job and a circulation job, and ultimately learned how the publishing industry works. And during that time, I had the good fortune to work for a very progressive publisher, a guy named Peter Spires, who is Publisher Backpacker. And he came in my office one day and said, "Hey, we're gonna put our content on America Online." And I said, "What? Huh? What's that?" And this was 92, 93. He said, "America Online has 200,000 subscribers. Rodale's putting our magazine content on it. You're the marketing director. You figure out a contest and figure out how to get some advertising going." And I thought, did the bus just hit me or what? So, it took me a few minutes to catch up to my first couple, he was a few steps ahead of us, caught up to him and said, okay. So anyway, to make a long story short, I had a great run there, but at the end I got the internet bug through that little project, which turned out to be quite interesting. Then for the meat and cheese portion of my career, I moved to Seattle, helped launch ESPN.com and some other websites in the early 90s. Then I moved to Boston to Forrester Research, and I think that's where we met because I was one of the first commerce analysts at a time when Forrester was launching that practice. And I'm proud to be one of the sort of matryoshka dolls in a line of people that your readers or listeners may know. So people like Carrie Johnson and Sucharita and Zia and in fact, Shop Talk, one of her brainchilds. But so Forrester became quite kind of good at sort of understanding the e-commerce space and ultimately the multi/omnichannel retail space. And I was really proud to be part of that group. And we supported shop.org during that day with a lot of our research. So it was a great time, and that's where we met. In fact, I stay current with some of those people. And then I moved,
as do I. When our lives, so to speak, intersect. I remember I was at Hudson's Bay, and it was often the case in Canada, being a fast follower of e-commerce, which is still pretty much the case. By connecting with you and the leaders and Carrie and wonderful people, super smart, I would almost like have a crystal ball, almost flawless, into what was going to happen in Canada in a few years. So, I was kind of like the Nostradamus of the internet. But the cheat was, I just called you up. This is going to go. I know my answers,
take that. Yeah, that's good. No, and I'll take that as a compliment, and also a real compliment to the way Forrester worked at that time. It still is a very highly regarded research company, but it was pretty intense, and it was a new space, and the leaders of that company at that time, Mary Modell, Blue Stein in particular, Emily Green, they made sure we worked our butts off to get things directionally correct and make sure that we could substantiate our prognostications. And so, it's really interesting. I look at those things now. Turns out we were conservative. At the time, people said we were crazy, but it was really interesting. So the Forrester chapter was great. And then I moved to Portland, where I live today out in the West Coast, and helped start a company, which many will know, called Lucy.com. So I was involved in a Lucy Activewear startup with the internet plus a catalog plus a store network over time, and essentially raised a bunch of venture capital. Bubble burst in 2000. I didn't need to be there. I left and I rejoined Forrester, but stayed in Portland as an analyst working with retailers on their sort of omnichannel stuff for a few years. And then ultimately I was never home, and said the whole point is to live in Portland. I was ready to do something different when Nike called, and so that was sort of the meat and cheese. The last chapter, Bunwise, the top part, was a 12-year run at Nike, and I did a couple different things there. Really got a great education on a massive consumer brand. I was a general manager, I was a strategy person, and for the last 6 years, I started and ran a team around the world of global digital commerce people who interestingly supported our wholesale or our indirect digital business. So I worked alongside Nike.com, but with our wholesale customers around the world. So in your neighborhood, think footlocker.ca, which actually didn't really exist at the time we started as an e-commerce site, and we kind of convinced them they needed to get in the game. So I worked with teams around the world on that business, which was my real love around, innovation, digital, what's growing, what's fast, what's new, and did that for 6 years, established the group. And then I was kind of trying to figure out what would my last chapter be, either at Nike or elsewhere. And for a variety of reasons, I ended up leaving in 2017 because I really wanted to get back to working with startups. And so, as my friends tell me now, the sort of the little toothpick with the olives on top, the little garnish on the top is this new reinvented chapter for me. I started a group called Oregon Sports Angels in late 2017. And that really is based on some of the things I just sort of rattled through, one of which was raising venture capital, one of which was helping startups, and one of which was real personal crusade was, here I am in Oregon, which is one of the most relevant concentrated places for sports industry people and companies, and there's still a challenge if you want to start a company here with respect to capital. So I said, okay, there's enough wealth creation from the big ones, Nike, Adidas, Columbia, the people are here. But angel investors are normally tech people, so I have just enough knowledge of both spaces to go and figure this out. So I kind of took that on as a project / crusade. And so here we are 3 years later. Oregon Sports Angels is we think the only kind of specialized sports angel network in the country. And we have about not quite 30 members right now, and we've invested about a little over $1.5 million in 8 different companies, including one, Mendy, that you spoke to a few weeks ago. But we are looking for products.
Rachel Rapino.
Yeah.
Our universes collided yet again with Rachel, and it's funny because the reason I connected with Rachel, we were supposed to come up to Toronto to speak at a cannabis conference in the fall, and I called her up and I said, "Hey, listen, not for nothing, but I don't think you're coming in the fall. So if you're open to it, let's talk now." It was wonderful listening. She's really super smart, and I think this kind of next generation thinker. So I can really we'll get to it a bit later, but I can really see through why that one would grab your attention for a whole number of different reasons. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. And so anyway, but so that's kind of, that was a real quick snapshot of my life as a hoagie. And I would just encourage the listeners who've come so far to kind of think about what's next. And so when I look back on my career, I realized there are a couple things. One, I'm a generalist. I get bored easily. So if I'm not continually learning and doing new things, I'm kind of a waste. And then the second is I've gotten more clear as I've gotten older on, it's really about the people, and then finding those intersections with great people doing something that I'm sort of either knowledgeable about or passionate about, and sometimes both. So that's kind of how I'm spending my time now. I stay involved with retail and digital and help some brands as a board director and some other cool stuff. But it's a fun chapter.
It really seems like you've been angling, so to speak, towards this kind of enterprise, whether it's Oregon Sports Angels or the other work, your entire career. And let's talk about the time we're in today. Outdoor is having such a moment, if we can call it this outdoor economy, right? We learn and have come to learn that being outdoor is safer than being indoor right now. And it's really that time. But, when you thought about the Oregon Sports Angels and with the decades of experience that you've got, whether, as you've been saying, you're on the front lines, you're an operator, you're a general manager, you're an investor, you're a consultant, what has surprised you about how e-commerce has evolved over the past couple of decades? I mean, you already said you in some ways you were conservative in your estimates back in the late 90s, early 2000s. Is there anything that surprised you from just being able to sit back with all these different perspectives and look at where we are today and perhaps where we'll be tomorrow?
It sounds, it's 10 years ago, but I feel like the iPhone was a little bit of a surprise. And mainly in that it was kind of this, it was a game changer for connected consumers and by extension for e-commerce, pretty much all things digital. So I think the rapid arrival of smartphones, iPhone, Samsung, iOS, whatever, but the rapid arrival and acceptance and how quickly they proliferated. It shouldn't have surprised us in a way because it's at least mostly a more affordable, more accessible, more useful device than a computer. Yeah. But I'd say that was a surprise and probably how quickly it accelerated a bunch of behaviors. So I'd say that would be one sort of turning point event. The other one, and this may be because of when back then, when I was thinking about e-commerce, we had been asked about international growth and trends. And as you said a minute ago about Canada, there were other countries that were, kind of fiddling around or experimenting around, but there was nothing obvious that was going to blow up. And so I'd say in the spirit of surprise, I had no visibility to or experience with China, but I'd say the unbelievable acceleration of not just the economy and the rise of the middle class in China, but the rapid adoption of all things digital in China and just how game changing that has been. And of course, when I was at Nike, a lot of the innovation or the ideas from innovation came, ironically, it used to be U.S., informing or leading not just Canada, but other countries, South America, Europe, et cetera. It became China is so far ahead of the rest of the world. If you don't know what they're doing and learning from what they're doing, you're going to be behind. So I'd say the role of China
It really, you're absolutely right about that one. And in fact, we can say continues to be the case, right? When I talk to the GELF, the Global E-Commerce Leaders Forum, and my podcast, we often call China the headwaters for e-commerce. I just interviewed Jeff Lord from Burton Snowboards in Vermont, and he said, "Listen, China is the tip of the spear. It drove all the innovation. It continues to drive much of the innovation for and just the market size is enormous. So I guess the two kind of went together. I guess, as you say, it's funny. I call it 2020 vision, which is a funny thing to say these days, but nobody really had the vision about what we're going to be going through today. But, looking back, it's kind of, wow, I didn't see that coming, and we should have. But it wasn't always that obvious, right? Like in the 90s, it wasn't always, these two things were not that obvious.
Right. And there was a lot less visibility. China was not yet as open as they are today, and one might argue they're not open, but in terms of coming and goings and Westerners able to visit and do business and vice versa, I think that, the last 20 years has been a game changer. So I'd say China. And then the third thing, and this is more in the, why are we surprised? I find it very interesting and maybe somewhat surprising. File this under the everything old is new again category. One of the things that as I talk to brands and retailers even today, and I hate to rely on the 3 C's, but the 3 C's never went out of style. The 3 C's being content, commerce, and community. They're just sort of re-energized. And I think that, to your podcast listeners, whether you're a brand or a retailer, the notions of what we used to back in a million years ago say, you need to have some content strategy, some commerce strategy, and some community strategy. I still give the same speech today and do the same work today. It's the way we do the work and the way we can integrate those things, which has changed for the better. You can, much more easily flow people between those 3 things and create more value, not just for that consumer and their experience, but ostensibly for the brand or for the retailer. So I think it's pretty interesting that has continued to be super relevant over a pretty long history now of last 25 years.
Well, and in fact, you could argue that the COVID crisis has either been an accelerant to that or a catalyst. So for those who weren't prepared for that kind of community, I mean, what I saw from retailers' performance worldwide, but certainly here in Canada, was those who were more evolved on those 3 C's entering the crisis have, notwithstanding the fact that that some formats did better than others, but were able to survive and or thrive because they were already where they needed to be versus, and it's never too late to catch up, but, they certainly had a head start into managing the COVID era, which, it's going to be however long it's going to be, right? Let's get back to the Oregon Sports Angels. When I go to conferences, it seems to be where we're having the conference interview today, but when I go to conferences, I love to sit on any discussion where venture capitalists or people who need to invest are, because they're looking for the future. So I just love listening to people like yourself because you're thinking ahead, and it's almost like, the typical Canadian reference to Wayne Gretzky, skating where the puck is going to be. It's often what I find, people like yourself do. So take me a bit into your tradecraft when you're presented in these deal meetings and you and your colleagues are evaluating proposals. What makes the difference between a successful pitch and one that gets you left by the touchline? See what I did there? I'm putting in some soccer things there just to kind of connect the sports.
I got you.
All right. What are the key things you're looking for an investment? People, that would put them on the first team to continue the sports analogy. So tell me a bit of your tradecraft in your approach.
Yeah. Okay. Sure. Well, it's a great question, and it's actually, maybe I'll just start with maybe a comment. My personal comment / point of view is separate the pitch from the idea and the founder. Because a lot of people get a little bit cramped on, quote, how did your pitch go? And I've seen great founders with great ideas make a horrible pitch. And so that comes to the point about, the presentation and what you need to do to clearly communicate your story. But back to what an investor, and I'm one, and I reflect maybe with this comment some of the voices of the other Oregon Sports Angels, who are kind of a third from the industry of sports, a third from technology industry, and a third sort of founders who've been there, done that, know how to start and grow a company. So that cross section of us, what I / we look for, we debate all the time, jockey or the horse. We especially at the very early stage, it really starts with the founder. And if there's a co-founder, it starts with the co-founders and or the founding team, because you're really betting on that person or those people as just a concept. And so the strength of the founder is really almost the most important thing at the stage that we see them. It changes over time. So a venture capitalist looking at a B or a C round, it's a different set of kind of priorities. But for us, that's one of the most important, if not the most important thing. Then the second is market, opportunity and the idea. Like, what is the idea and how does it align against it has to be a meaningful market. And in our case, we are looking to find founders who want to start companies that will be something an athlete, a team, or a fan can use or wear. So it took us a while to get in our zone, but that's essentially what we're looking for. And then in that zone, includes products and services. And one of the other really great crystallizing comments one of our other members made, which stuck with me and would help anyone who's thinking of pitching an idea or deciding to invest, is, I use it all the time, is so now you have potentially a really great, compelling founder telling a story, pitching something to us that, as I described, an athlete can use or wear, whatever. And the question we then have is this a feature kind of a level of something? Like, is it incrementally thing on something that exists already, incrementally better? Is it a product, like is it an actual product that could have some legs as a product and or multiple products in a line? Or, importantly, is it a company? And that sort of hierarchy is very crystallizing. And so we've seen a lot of great founders with great product ideas. Feature ideas are like, yep, that's cool, not investable, not at venture scale. Product ideas start to get very interesting, and especially if you can imagine subsequent products and the development of a line, the establishment of a brand and a company that sells more than one thing. And then really what we want to find is a brand, a brand that can create a meaningful company for the future. And so that takes some heavy discussion and debate. A lot of founders think they have a great company idea when in fact they may ultimately have a product idea, which could be fundable in and of itself. Or they may just have a feature, a better widget, a better mousetrap for something that already exists, and that's great, but not for us. And it doesn't mean there's not a meaningful business for someone, but it's not call it a venture investable thing. So those are a few things that I look for, and then then the other is I'd say really, really important is coachability. And no, I don't have all the answers. Nobody has all the answers. If you're not coachable, particularly, even business, if you're not coachable in business, you're going to struggle. If you're not coachable as a startup founder, you're doomed because you won't have all the answers and you're going to need a ton of help. And if you don't know how to ask for and accept that help, you're going to fail.
It's so interesting. Such a different mental perspective, right? I guess it's hard to teach, right? They come to ride with it or don't, right?
Yes, I agree. It's very hard to teach that, but you also, the flip side is, it when you see it. And this is why, in sports, it's a little easier because athletes are either coachable or not. So it's something that athletes tend to either have or they don't. And our community has a lot of coaches who are pretty good at sussing out whether athletes are coachable. So we just translate that mindset to founders and say, is this founder a coachable founder or not? And if they're not a coachable human, then we're probably moving on. It doesn't mean they don't have a good business idea or can't execute or be very successful. It's not going to work for our group the way we operate. We want to coach and help these people. And yes, it's hard to ask for help. And I've personally learned how to get better at that over time. That's definitely a signal. So, a founder who approaches us who is looking for help and coaching is generally more likely to succeed getting, to the next step with us than someone who comes in with hey, we got this. We want lucky you. We want to bring you into it kind of an attitude. Great. So, so those are a few things. Yeah.
All right. So stepping back, if you can, putting your hat back on the retail space, advice to retailers who are listening, 2 starts and 1 stop. Based on what we know today, what we know about the COVID era, what we know about tomorrow, again, some things surprise you, many things don't. 2 starts, things that they should start doing if they're not, and 1 thing they should just stop doing.
That's a good one. It's kind of the invest versus divest question. I'll go back to something I said, and we talked about the 3 C's. So if you're not fully invested, if you're whether you're a brand or a retailer, in my opinion, if you're not fully investing in, content to tell your brand story, to convey your value proposition, to attract and engage consumers. If you're not investing in content, mostly digital, but in general, you're doomed. And some people aren't, right? It takes time and money. It takes a focus. Second is commerce. It's pretty obvious, but I feel like there are always new ways to think about commerce and commercial engagement and getting the sale. And so maybe an example in this case would be if you're not looking at multiple types of payment options and different ways to allow consumers to pay, including touchless, including, payment structures, different, just payments in general.
Like deferred payments, any of those things.
Yes, any of those things. So it's like if you're not making it easier to do a commercial activity, and you're not focused on, building that great experience with all the technology that's available, you're kind of doomed. And then lastly, community. I feel like especially now in this wacky, weird COVID era, and not just one, the one we're in now, but the BC and AC, before Corona, after Corona, or however you're labeling it, I do think consumers are changing and going to stay changed around this notion of community. Like, who do we really want to see in the future? Right now, I think a lot of people are in this mode of, I'm not seeing a lot of people. And that some of us are saying, well, when the dust clears, who do I actually really want to see? And it's, I think, going to create a wave of reprioritizing our communities and changing the communities that we're with. So, and then you layer in the sort of the diversity and inclusion and what's going on with racial equality and stuff. And I feel like community is always been important, and it's taking on a new kind of importance. And so if you're a brand or a retailer, you're trying to figure out what role do I play in my internal community, which obviously are your employees, my external, who are probably a lot remote right now or might be scared or trying to work in an unusual situation. So like, how do I re-engage and rebuild my employee community would be a great example of something to start doing, including with the diversity and inclusion lens. And then the second is my consumer community. How can I help them through this time and serve them in ways that are helpful, and look forward to the future and interact with them in a totally different way in 2 to 3 years, because I do think that's the opportunity. So that's a little bit of maybe probably more answers than you asked for, but I would encourage people to start thinking of things that way and start thinking of a future where those three things will be, you'll need to be doing them in different ways.
That's very sad. It's very savvy advice. I literally just got off a call this morning with a retailer who's thinking much along that community range. Like, they've come to those same realizations. They're already quite advanced in that thinking, but they're accelerating that and notion just for all the reasons you said. All right, last question. You've got
well, hold on. I do have a rant on stop.
Oh yeah, please.
Because I didn't quite say stop, but stop. I'm very. Some of your listeners will already be here, but for those who aren't, please stop. Please stop saying, quote, I need a digital strategy. Okay, I don't think you need a digital strategy. I think you should start saying strategy for a digital world. And that I say that a little bit in jest, but really to make a point, which is, if you're still operating in some world where there's a siloed thing, or the digital people, or that's what those people do, I'm like, you're doomed. If you're not recognizing that it is a digital world, it's powered by digital, the foundation has shifted, the infrastructure has shifted to this modern digital connected world. If you're not thinking about your strategy for that world, you're doomed. So anyway, that's my last, stop saying digital as an adjective. Say like strategy for this digital world. Okay, so there's that rant.
Excellent rant. Love that. I missed that. I missed that from our conversations from 2 decades ago, but it's so great to listen to it again. All right. So okay, now let's see if you want to rant on this last question. You've got several brands who I would say have been sitting on the sidelines of direct-to-consumer literally for decades, kind of one foot in, kind of one foot out. There's certainly exceptions. Nike, for example, if you want to talk about an exception, who's kind of thought in some ways as a leader and thinking about, all those different channels. You've got this unique time where more consumers are doing e-commerce, more, I think, either forgiveness or more openness to trying different things. I think that's one of the most sustainable, so to speak, elements of the pandemic is this hard reset on consumer habits. We've got this unique time. Is now the time, if you were, talking to a brand who both sells in retail, kind of sells direct to consumer, is this the time now when they get off and out of the defensive third and get into the offensive third of the field in terms of going direct to consumers? And what are your thoughts on that? Or is this just going to pass and retailers, the big keep getting bigger? We see that in the results last week. You stick with your partners, continue a multi-channel, so to speak, with channel partners, and where do you sit on that?
Yes, and I like this one a lot because yes, any brand needs to have a direct connection with consumers. I don't care if you're in CPG, if you're in healthcare, if you're in athletics and sportswear, like cars, travel. You need a direct connection to consumers, if for no other reason than marketing purposes. So I think you need to have direct access and direct rapport with consumers in this day and age, period, hard stop. I think the commercial strategy varies. Again, it depends on the historical or the sort of the legacy position of the brand versus, how much wholesale versus retail versus, are they already a vertically integrated brand? And you have to kind of, and my experience with that is to just do a from to exercise and say, if consumers have access now and want access directly to buy from you directly, you got to make that possible or you're going to lose market share. The second thing you have to acknowledge is the structural collapse of a lot of physical retail formats, and the reality of a lot of that distribution is going away. And then the third point, which you just mentioned, you have to acknowledge is the barbelling of the largest are getting larger. And so in many cases, it sort of becomes this, and it continues to be an and strategy of, yes, I want to do some direct to consumer, and I need to support my major wholesale customers for whatever reasons, including that's where consumers prefer to shop for whatever reasons. So I kind of have the and mindset in this one. It's a little more, this one is one of those, it'd be easy to have a soundbite, but it's actually I find a case by case example or sort of answer, depending on the sort of the legacy or the current position of the brand with respect to retail and distribution, and what their future, goals and aspirations are. But yeah, I think you need, if you're not working on a way to connect, even say through those 3 C's, and a small piece of it may be commerce, and maybe a large piece of it is commerce. But if you're not doing that now, yeah, good luck. So I don't know if that completely answers your question, but Nike's a great example. They have shifted over the years, and they're in a very interesting transition. Just one point on Nike, they now have a new CEO, John Donahoe, with, he's the first CEO at Nike who has very deep, relevant digital background and experience. And he's bringing a new level of expertise and focus. And you're seeing that play through already in some of the acceleration that they're doing. So Nike was already developing its direct-to-consumer business for many years, including .com, including connecting all the channels for their own purposes, as any good retailer should do. So they've been becoming a better omnichannel retailer and a digital leader. But now you can see some of the things they're doing around content. They're really investing in content, workouts and training clubs, and ways to engage consumers that, have no direct connection to commerce until they make the integration. But they're building that community, they're delivering content, and they're paying it off with commerce. And I think that's a great example of a brand doing that. And at the same time, they're still supporting their largest, most important wholesale customers. Foot Locker would be a notable example, because that's where a lot of consumers prefer to shop, because they want to look at Nike next to Adidas, next to Puma, next to Under Armour, or whoever. So, and that's where a lot of the market share is. So I think that's a good example of what I described as sort of this and mindset around winning with consumers based on where consumers want to do their business and their transactions.
Well, such a great conversation. I really thank you for spending your time with me. I think the only thing that would have made this conversation better is if it was in person, but we'll have to wait till another day for that. But next best thing is to have this opportunity to speak with you. If people want to learn more, perhaps about Oregon Sports Angels, where would they go to learn a bit more about that, and just follow up on that?
People can swing by www.oregonsportsangels.org. We are open for business. Feel free to just reach out. You can find us on LinkedIn or Twitter. We're open for business, and so if it's relevant, we'd love to hear from you. Separately, Michael, it's been a pleasure to catch up and relive some times from the past, but importantly, maybe help your listeners think about the future, getting through today, but importantly, what lies ahead. And I'm an eternal optimist, and even though it's incredibly challenging right now, I know that there are enough people working toward some percentage of our time toward the future that, when we get there, it'll be quite different. And I believe it should be very rewarding and fulfilling for us as well.
Well, Kate, stay safe until we see each other again, and best of continued luck, or best of fortunes with everything you're working on. And once again, thanks for joining me on The Voice of Retail.
You're welcome. It was my pleasure, Michael. See you soon. Stay well.
Thanks to Jeanne and Kate for being my guests, and to Astound Commerce for their support of this episode. If you like this podcast, please subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform, rate and review, and be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of Emmy LeBlanc Company, Inc. You can learn more about me on www.emmyleblanc.co, or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a safe week.